lockdown policies destroying the future for America's children? And it's so bad, even the New York Times is noticing. Kids are starting the new year in crisis, thanks to a year of pandemic-related social isolation. Mental health is getting worse for teens, with a dramatic increase in emergency department visits. Suicide attempts are sharply up among adolescent girls, rising by 51% since 2019. Gun violence against children has increased in places like Chicago, and there's an uptick in disruptive behavior. All that is on top of the major loss in learning from students not being in classrooms. President Biden saying today that he wants to keep schools open. All right. Then let's talk, guys, about this crisis. We knew during the Trump administration that kids were suffering, but why have we been so willing to allow our kids to suffer and disregard the damage to them, knowing that this was inevitable? I'll go to you, Greg.
Well, I mean, we should come up with a phrase called the 5 reality lag. Because it's the time between when we sound some alarm and when the when the legacy media finally goes, oh yeah, that is a problem. This is what's been going on with COVID since, I don't know, almost 2 years. And then if you look at the crime issue, which we've been talking about, and then there's this reality lag. But there's some obvious truths here. If there's a lack of coherent structure in life, that makes life less appealing. If you got nothing to do, life becomes nothing. And that's what I think you're seeing a lot with kids who need structure in their lives. They don't just need a goal, they need a system, because sometimes you can't meet the goals during a pandemic. And then you have their leading comorbidity. 60% of kids that are in hospitals are clinically obese due to COVID. In hospital because of COVID are also clinically obese. That was a new stat. And it's like our country is run by Tony the Tiger. Like all this sugar and all these carbs, we actually have to face this. We have to have a reckoning with our diet, because I think the pandemic has shined a light on a lot of these stressed areas of our civilization: mental health, fitness, and diet. And we're finding out where our weak spots are. It's definitely our diet.
Well, there's no question. And Dana, you work out all the time. And what we've got are young people who are simply not working out, in addition to all of the other harms. I mean, how do we make up for not just the academic loss, but the kids who are suffering from, not just the suicide attempts, but depression, anxiety, isolation, panic, all of the emotions that these kids are now experiencing?
Well,
how do we make up for that?
Well, not only that, but we have robbed them of some serious academic achievement and accomplishments. And these kids know that they're going to have to compete against the world, and that their competitors, like the Chinese, for example, are way ahead of them in terms of some of the big career choices that they'll have to make in the future, like STEM classes, science, technology, and math. The other thing is free to learn. This is an education group just put out a poll that said that 55% of parents said that virtual learning has had a negative impact on their child's academic performance. 60% said that it had a negative impact on their children's health. So we all know that this is happening. What the government is supposed to do, and we're talking about leadership in the A block, instead of following the 5 several months later, you lead by doing risk analysis, and Greg's talked about this a lot as well. So you do a cost-benefit analysis. There's a whole office in the Office of Management and Budget within the Executive Office of the President that basically, that's all they do. For example, they want to raise mileage standards for cars, fine. But you have to weigh the risks of possibly making the cars lighter, which could lead to more accidents, more accidents leading to more deaths. Right. And you do the calculations and you figure it out. And as rational people, we move forward. We now have tons of information. This isn't January of 2020. Schools do not need to be shut down. Right. Kids don't need to be wearing masks. That was in the Atlantic. Talk about the legacy media. Here you have David Lanhart of the New York Times, who is finally, well, I shouldn't say finally, he's been very good on this issue all along. The great thing is that once he says it, unlike when the 5 says it, once he says it, then you'll see it repeated on tomorrow morning's MSNBC talk show.
Well, Jesse, what about the fact that, you know, are these kids going to be considered like that lost 2 or 3 year group in terms of, you know, going forward? I mean, are people going to look back and say, you know what, they can't do as well academically, or they're not doing as well sports-wise, socially, because they're part of the pandemic suppressed group of kids?
They'll be stunted, and they'll have a lot more obstacles to overcome than a lot of other students at the same age.
Yeah.
This country talks such a big game about, you know, Judge, put the children first. It's all about the kids. How often do we hear that? It's all talk. Because the minute that there was a little risk that little Johnny could come home from middle school with something and sneeze on mom and dad, oh my God, panic. We're just going to derail this kid's childhood for maybe the rest of his life. I don't want to downplay COVID-19, but other adults and other generations, Judge, went off to war in the Pacific, in Europe, to save their own children from communism, totalitarianism. But what did this generation do? As soon as something came along that had a 99% chance of survivability, they shut everything down. And all of a sudden, the media woke up to what we've been saying for at least a year and a half. But where have they been? They know this hurts the children, but they waited. And we know why they waited, because it was a political move to wait. Now it's important to reopen. Now they care about the kids. They didn't care about the kids when Trump was president.
Well, it's also an election year. But, Geraldo, it brings me back to the first question. Why were we so willing to sacrifice the kids for the benefit of some of the adults, the teachers in particular?
Because we were scared to death. I think that it's easy now to look back and say, oh, we shouldn't have been as scared as we were. I remember a year ago, I just am now tested positive 10 days ago. A year ago, exactly a year ago, my beloved nephew, Bob Reed, died of this disease. He was 60 years old, of 2 beautiful children, Casey and Tyler, beautiful wife, Michelle. He died. So the deep concern we have was not ill-founded. You know, now the Omicron is a whole different ballgame. But wait, let me just finish this. The gun violence. I live in Cleveland. We have a terrible rate of murder with kids and guns, and every big city, you see what's happened across the country, cities across the country. When you take away the public school, the only structure these children have, and you have all these guns in their pockets, what they do is they go out and they act out, and it's just horrible. And the final thing I want to say is that I'm very concerned about exercise deprivation and you know the depression that comes with isolation. As the father of 3 girls, you know these are real issues that we have to address. And I deplore the fact that there's 2 sides. There should be one side on how to approach this.
Okay,
and Greg's right about obesity.
Yeah, he is. But, you know, in the end, you've got the UFT, you've got the teachers who are still fighting to not go back. And that doesn't in any way take away from what happened a year or 2 years ago.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.